Good morning. Just now, oh, come on, lamp. There we go. I love that lamp. Just now getting up, and I'm turning on all my lamps because I have lots of lamps. That's a really cool lamp. And I just felt compelled to say, there is only one ego. And when you realize this, it is such a burden lifted. When I began to learn about who I am, what makes Cody tick, who is Cody really, in the beginning of that spiritual journey, I used to identify with the thought that I have an ego and that I have to deal with my ego and I have to learn how to let go of my ego. And I was completely blind to the fact that every time I said my ego, it was really the ego talking about itself. Because for something to be mine is to separate from everything else. And one day I was taking a shower, and in the middle of the shower, this thought came to me, and it was, we are all one. Creation is one, which means there can only be one ego. And this was a very mind-blowing realization. And as I began to learn more about who I was, what made Cody tick, as I began to listen to hours and hours of psychiatry on YouTube and therapy and psychology and read more books, I thought to myself, or I should say, the thought occurred to me. I said, oh, this makes sense. It's why we have these practices. Because the more we begin to understand about our own minds and the way that our mind works, the more we understand other people's minds and the more we understand how the world works. And for the longest time, I used to say to myself, well, yes, everything's all one, and that's why. But then I would say well, but my ego, when the reality is, the more we begin to understand the ego, the one of creation, the more you begin to understand yourself and your ego, the more you understand others and the more you understand creation. I've had conversations with people, close friends and family, and specifically, let's talk about my friends. They will be or have dealt with really painful or stressful personal situations. And sometimes, depending on the friend, I felt inclined to, to offer a perspective if I felt that they were open to it. And sometimes the response that they would give to me would be, well, you just don't understand. You don't understand. You don't have this thing that I have. You don't know this thing that I'm going through. And from a certain perspective, totally, right? Maybe I don't have your exact mom or dad. I never lived where you lived. I'm not in the same position as you are in this lifetime. But that's also a very, very common thing that the ego will say so it doesn't have to take accountability for its own healing. And I realize this because it's something I've said when I was feeling stressed or fear in any kind of way. And now I understand in my own life when I'm being run by fear, when the emotion of fear and I'm having fearful thoughts are running my decision making and what I'm saying, ultimately I'm being run by the ego. My dad also had worked in rehabilitation with addicts and talk about one of the things that addicts will talk about in order to give them an excuse to continue to use. Well, you don't understand. You're not me. You haven't been in this situation. And for a lot of people who don't understand who they are, when somebody says that to them, well, you don't know what I'm talking about and you don't understand, that can be very valid because they don't know who they are. But once you begin to see the ego's programs, I don't necessarily have to go and be a drug addict to know how to treat addiction, because in some other avenues in my life, addiction takes place. All of us are addicted to phones. All of us have some kind of addiction that manifests in some way. And why? Because the ego, which is based off of fear, is solely based off of external programming. And we're all experiencing the same external program while we're here. Because remember, there's only one ego, just like we're all only one. Now, we're also each unique individuals of the whole of this one creation. But the ego, which can only run off of fear, is not unique. And it is not an individual. It's the lack of individuality. If you think about back in high school or back in middle school or whatever school days, we would be insecure. So we'd be feeling fear. We want to be accepted. And maybe not all of you were this way, but many of us will know when you're feeling insecure and you want to be accepted, you don't act in your authentic self. And so you behave like everybody else. And so when somebody looks at you and says, well, you don't understand, I'm not going to listen to you because you don't know what you're talking about. Maybe that's true. But also maybe a part of them doesn't want to take accountability. I can't tell you what the case is for you in your situation. All I know is in my situations and the things that I've experienced. Because I've been on both sides. I've been on the side of, well, you don't know. And I've been on the side of offering a perspective. And not a perspective like, hey, I'm right and I have this to say, because that's just ego. When I say I'm offering a perspective, it's simply, hey, this is what I'm seeing and I care about you. Whatever comes out of that is up to the other person, because I can't force anybody to do something that they don't want to do. But I can offer my authentic perspective, because I've always appreciated when I've been offered authentic perspectives, even in the moments when I'm like, I don't want it. So, couple different closing thoughts, maybe. You have, and I posted this earlier, but you have so much to offer. So, shine your light brightly. Express what you want to express. of course, be kind, be honest, and communicate with an open mind. Communicate as if everything you want is to bridge a relationship. Because even if the other person might not take you serious or tell you that you're wrong, it doesn't take away from the fact that what you have to say still is valuable. And maybe you can, by just expressing what you want to express, you get to plant seeds that will grow and flourish in whatever way that ultimately manifests in the other. And finally, there's only one ego. And so as you begin to learn about what makes you tick, sometimes people are going to tell you and say, actually, that's not true. That's not the case. And ultimately, you get to decide what you resonate with. But I don't want you to discount what you come to learn about who you are. Because the more you learn about yourself, remember, you are actually learning about the world. Because the world is run by human beings. The world is a part of this one creation that we all are a part of. Our rules and our society was built by human minds. And you are equally one of those human minds. Just like how we watch animals act out their behavior in the wild, sometimes there's anomalies in these animals, but even the anomalies still ultimately act out in similar ways to the rest of their species or subgroup. And so when you learn about who you are, when you understand, and maybe you're doing shadow work, or maybe you're just figuring out through therapy, oh, this is why I am the way that I am, you're going to start seeing that manifest in other people. It's going to be easier for you to recognize this person's in pain, this person's struggling, this person feels alone, because you're beginning to recognize those things within yourself. You're beginning to see the ego. And that's all the spiritual journey is. It's climbing the mountaintop so that as you get higher, your vision expands. And the more your vision expands, the more you can see the ego's programming that's driving you. And the more you see the programming, the more options you have available to you to reprogram yourself from a place of authenticity and love. Because if fear is the program that we're running off of, we're not really making any free will decisions. Emotions and fear thoughts are driving our decisions. But when we begin to recognize those things and see those things, they separate from us because they were never us. The fear was never us. Then we can begin to make true free will decisions, because life is creative, and life is loving, and life is joyous, and life is expansion. That's the only direction life can go. Period. And once we tap into that, watch what happens with our lives. Watch what type of relationships you join. Watch what happens with jobs or where you live. And the funniest thing is, even if nothing ultimately changes on paper, everything changes in your experience because you're able to see things from a whole new perspective. So anyways, have a great rest of your day. Here's my lamp and my tarot card. Thanks.